Hey, everybody, welcome back. This is Emily Moyer. Laura Wilson is with me today, and I will explain that in just a moment. But before we get started on today's show, I wanted to let everyone know if you are watching this on the Off Planet Media YouTube channel, this show and some of my others will still continue to appear here, but all of my work can be found on the Emily Moyer YouTube channel, and all the shows that I post here will be available first, so go over there and hit subscribe, and now we're on with the show. So this is episode number 6 of Internal Alchemy, and we have a returning guest. Dr. Keys is with us, or I call her Dr. Keys. Other people call her Dr. K or Dr. Keasberry or whatever. And she was the first guest on Internal Alchemy, and it's been about a year. So we're going to have her back. But also, Laura and I have been doing the health and wellness meetup chat group for our patrons for a couple of months now. And Laura decided she was ready to make a go at seeing how she did on a show. So she may occasionally appear on the Internal Alchemy show here with me. So today's the first time. And we picked today because this is a patron suggestion driven show today. I want to just do a little shout out. I don't know, hopefully he's okay with me saying this, so I'm just going to call him Phil, so that if he doesn't want to be identified, he can't be. But he had sent me some requests about doing a show on thyroid, or he wanted me to answer some questions for him about thyroid and about Epstein-Barr virus. And these are both issues that actually Laura has dealt with and that I know that Dr. Keys is really good on. So Phil, thank you for the suggestions. I think this is going to be an interesting show. And I also know that you're having a particularly hard week, Phil. So my love goes out to you, and I hope you're doing okay. And with that, Dr. Keys, welcome back to Internal Alchemy. How you doing?
Thank you so much. Fine, thank you. Everything's good.
Cool. All right. Well, the world is insanely crazy, and instead of playing to that noise, we're just going to focus in on issues that are actually real and actually matter. So,
all right.
Okay. So Phil, what I'm going to do is Phil had sent some good detailed questions. I have some of my own, so I'm going to just go with what we kind of want to talk about regarding the thyroid, and if his answers haven't been covered by the time we're at the end, then I'll just kind of straight up ask those. But we want to get into thyroid because this is something that has come. She's always known she had thyroid issues. Also, wait, before we get started, Laura, welcome to Internal Alchemy for the first time.
Thanks for having me, Emily.
So she's always known she had some thyroid issues, or at least for most of her adult life. And I never was aware of it until the first time I went to see you. And you informed me of an interesting kind of thyroid issue that I hadn't heard before, and we'll get to that. But before we get into like the deeper, weirder stuff related to the thyroid, like, can you just sort of like give people a background on like the thyroid, why it's important, and some of the conditions that you often find with people related to thyroid?
Oh, sure. So the thyroid, if anyone doesn't know, it's situated right here at the base of the neck. And then if you put your fingers side to side, you can actually probably feel it pushing a soft, spongy type gland in between your fingers. And so the thing to often check, and I tell people this all the time, is you should be doing this regularly to see if all of a sudden something feels different, because people with enlarged thyroids can actually feel it much more easily. When it gets to a certain size, then of course other people will start going, what's going on with your neck type of thing, you know? But yeah, so that's always where I start. The thyroid is so important. It's all, to me, it feels like, because every patient, I would say, well, 99% of my patients come in with something going on with their thyroid, is just super important in all facets. Metabolism, very big. Most people that have a thyroid problem are either a little skinnier than they would like, majority a little heavier than they would like, right? So that's where metabolism comes in. Your body energy, that comes from the thyroid. When the thyroid's affected, it also affects hormones, and it does that via the liver. So the signals going to the liver don't get there properly, and then the liver's not getting the right information to help send other messages out to the rest of the body. And that's only like a small fraction of it. There's a triangle: the thyroid, the heart, and the adrenals. So when I find people have an ongoing thyroid dysfunction, whether it be hyper or hypo, hypo means slow, hyper means too fast. When I find that, I'm always finding that the adrenals have been affected, because guess who does the work of the dysfunctional thyroid, for years until it gets too bad? It's the adrenals. And we all are familiar with adrenals, I think, at this point, for handling stress, and like as if the world isn't full of enough stress right now, right? So our adrenals are always being tested. The thyroid is being tested. Also, if you think about it, it's situated here. So all the food that you take in, whether it be full of pesticides or other chemicals, metals, that type of thing, it goes right by your thyroid. So for people that don't think that can affect, well, everybody's got their opinion, but for me, it's like a no-brainer. Everything that goes by that thyroid affects the thyroid. So I guess that's it for the thyroid. We could get into really detailed stuff, but that's not going to interest anybody. It's a little too much probably. So
do you think that there is that you're seeing so many people with thyroid issues is just an effect of our modern day stresses in terms of lifestyle? Or do you think there's actually something frequency wise, technology wise, or nutrition wise that is intentionally targeting the thyroid?
Intentionally, I'm not 100% convinced of. Less intentionally than everything else that's being done to us, right? Through the waves and everything else. Do I think the thyroid is affected by radiation? Absolutely. What do they do when they're fixing a thyroid, right? What does Western medicine use? They use radiation.
Yeah.
And so all of the above, Emily, all of the above. It's the quality of the food. It's the air we breathe. It's the water we drink. It is the amount of technology that's being used, the waves in the air, 5G now, right? So it's basically a little bit of everything. Genetics are involved. And one of our topics for today, Epstein-Barr virus.
Yeah.
Seems to really have an effect on the thyroid, along with the rest of the body, of course. I mean, Epstein-Barr can potentially affect everything. There are so many variations of the main Epstein-Barr that, it just, to me, it's all one, because just because it's affecting something different doesn't necessarily make it a variation of Epstein-Barr. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah. So let's, so I want to do kind of stick with the thyroid in the first hour, and we can talk about Epstein-Barr as it relates to it, and then get into the weird and the nitty gritty about Epstein-Barr, because there's some very fascinating possibilities with Epstein-Barr
I know.
in the patrons segment. But okay. So I get you. I don't, one of the things, and I want to get into this in a little bit. I have a couple more questions, basic questions about the thyroid before we go a little bit deeper with it. But one of the things that I've been really keyed into is that one of the best things to control a population or to do direct mind control on an individual is to have control of their endocrine systems. And in order to reclaim our full sovereignty as beings, we need to learn how to, with our own mind and our own way we take care of ourselves, learn to control it. I started reading this really interesting book on an airplane once, and I never got a chance to finish it, but I need to circle back to it. That was really talking about mastering your own glands, when you get to the point where you can control your glands, you're unfuckable, right? When you can control when you secrete, what you secrete, how, and all that kind of stuff, then it doesn't matter what anything or anyone or any period, you're not touchable. What do you think about that?
That makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. I mean, I'm into energy healing.
Yeah.
So I believe energetically, once we tap into that in ourselves and we realize the power we have ourselves, we can fix anything. That is my true belief. Have I gotten there yet? Not 100%. That's why I'm still using vitamins and other supplements, right?
Yeah.
But I'm reading a book called The White Light right now, and there are so many good books out there, and I just take what I meant to take from each little thing, put it together, start practicing and see what works. It's kind of everybody, I feel, should be doing that. And if you're not doing that, it's because you're just not there yet. But everyone on their path will get there, and they're going to start realizing they have the control to fix their own thing. And you did bring up a good point about the thyroid. You were saying, what were you saying? It was what was the last thing you said? Past the EBV. Oh, controlling the gland.
Yeah.
Oh, it's escaped me. I'll come back to it.
This book was basically talking about like spiritual mastery or like true ascension, not the bullshit love and light crap and whatever. Like
Yeah.
the way that you do that is by learning to control your glands. Like that is actually like even what like the code, if you appropriately pick apart the coding of things like the Bible and other ancient texts and stuff like that, that's like really what it's getting at. Like it's many layers deep, that level of understanding, but that's like the real thing. Like the people who are like the true quote unquote ascended masters, right, have learned to completely control their body's response to any incoming factor, right? Like think about like right now, people's like hormones, their adrenals, their fight or flight, their cortisol, all this kind of stuff every day is being pinged by the news, right? Whether it's what they claim might be going on in people's bodies right now or what they claim might be going on the streets, right. Everything is designed to ping, 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 agitate, right? And so like, you know, those things that happen with our nervous system when our glands secrete something can be actually really powerful tools. They're obviously evolutionary adaptations that humans have made so that they're warned when something dangerous is happening or when they need more energy or less energy so they can sleep or function or something. And if you have control over when that happens, right, then it's like maximizing the way you use your energy and your time and your body and whatnot. But if it's being run by something outside of you, through, you know, whether it be frequency or just idea suggestion that makes you anxious or nervous or what you're eating or whatever, then you're not actually learning to like run your own energy economy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've never really heard it put the way you're putting it as far as just having the endocrine system as being the main controller. But the truth is, anyone that knows physiology, that's, you know, that is what controls how much hormone is spewed out reacting to something. I suppose it's really hard to kind of isolate it out just in general because it has to work with the nervous system, with the lymphatic system. You know, it has to work in conjunction with all the systems. But what drives it? Absolutely the endocrine system. So I think if you can, of course, if you can control your endocrine system, then you're in good shape, right? That being said, on your way there, like even just calming yourself down through deep breathing, you're inadvertently kind of controlling your endocrine system, but you're also controlling the other systems. I mean, they all work together. So it's very difficult for me to picture just working on one, fixing everything.
Yeah.
But I do get what you're saying. You know, that's what the Tibetan monks have learned to do. And these rainbow body people and all those things you hear about, you know, they have learned to control everything down to not needing food to survive and down to not needing to take a breath for 5-10 minutes. You know, it's about control of everything, including the emotions, because it's really emotions that don't allow you to do that stuff.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that like people come and they're either a little skinnier than they'd like to be or skinnier than is healthy or a little heavier than they'd like to be or is healthy. And so we think of that, okay, with the metabolism too slow, hypo, with the metabolism too fast, hyper. But there's other symptoms that go along with that, right? Besides just you can't lose weight or you can't gain weight.
Oh, yes, a lot of symptoms, yes.
You just maybe run through a few of those on each side of that. And then I want to kind of, after we've laid that out, I want you to get into your, I think this is your own thing because I've never heard anyone else talk about it, but your theory about this hidden hyperthyroid, right?
I actually was taught about that from the Uline nutritional systems, but for some reason it seems to have escaped most people. I'm not sure why. Oh, I think I wanted to say before that blood tests are just not accurate when it comes to the thyroid specifically. And my most common find in my office, especially with this thing you just mentioned called hidden hyperthyroid, when they come in presenting the symptoms of that, I will almost bet my life on the spot that the blood tests have not shown any inconsistencies or just don't. And what I tend to like to lay out to people, and it makes sense to them, is that giving blood is a moment in time, right? So when you're giving blood, whatever's read is gotten out of that sample, that's what you get on your report, and that's what you think is going on in your body all the time.
Yeah.
So anyone that knows anything about the body knows we are a body in motion. Everything is dynamic. Everything is constantly moving and changing, right? You're trying to keep equilibrium, homeostasis, you name it. You're trying to keep a well-oiled machine running. So when you give that blood in that second, and the way I don't want to go premature into it, but the hidden hyperthyroid means that sometimes your thyroid is revving like hyper, and sometimes it's hypo. And so that being said, if you just ran to the doctor's office and you're late for your appointment, and then you plop down and you give your blood, your thyroid level read, which has just adapted to you running in, is going to be much different than if you had been sitting there waiting for 2 hours, bored to death, and then you're totally relaxed giving blood, as relaxed as somebody's going to be, right? Yeah. So that's why I believe blood tests never really show the true thyroid. And even if they do it 3 different times in a week or something to try to get an average, it still doesn't work. It's the same as a woman's cycle. The hormones are different parts of the cycle.
Did you want to ask? Yeah, I wanted to ask about, do you know anything about like doing a urinalysis? So like I one of the doctors I worked with in Colorado Springs had me collect urine for 24 hours and then take a sample and send it in for my hormones and my thyroid hormones as well as my female hormones to see. She said that was a better measure than just the blood.
Yeah, well, then just the blood, maybe together to compare, but you know, I just don't have a lot of faith in any of those Western techniques of gathering anything, to be honest with you. There are too many factors that can affect the outcomes. So let's say your kidneys aren't working right that day and more stuff is getting through the kidney tubules than should be allowed. Then it's going to skew the whole test result.
Yeah.
Right? Let's say you have a virus and you don't realize it. Your kidneys are just not working up to speed, or your liver's dumping stuff that just alters the test results. That's really the crux of why I don't put a lot of faith in the results. I mean, I often use and look at people's results in my findings just to get ideas, though. I never take it verbatim because to me, it's really kind of meaningless for most things. Not, of course, for everything, but for most.
Yeah, I also, even like, let's just forget the possibility of being late to the doctor's office and running or sitting still for 2 hours. If a person has any anxiety about being poked with a needle, right, that can also spike it. Like, so I don't have anxiety about being poked with a needle, but I have a very weird phenomenon. If I'm giving, and I didn't figure this out until it happened. The first time I ever had to give blood, I'm just sitting there giving blood, and all of a sudden I hear she's fainting, right? And I feel myself starting to fall. So what I figured out is if I see my own blood, it makes me faint. Right. So I can't look at that. So that can't possibly give an appropriate reading. So now if I give blood, I have to look the other way. You know what I mean? But like some people, you know, it doesn't cause a mental scared for me, but obviously there's some weird thing that
subconscious reaction. Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of people who have anxiety, even if they just tense up their muscles or they try to breathe slower than they normally do to try and relax themselves. So they're not, that is altering their normal state. So it isn't going to be an accurate read possibly, right?
That's right. Possibly. Yes. Yeah. Especially if you have something that responds to your state of angst. So remember I said there's a triangle, the adrenals, the heart, and the thyroid. So what do you think is going to happen if all of a sudden you're freaking out that you're giving blood and your adrenals start going crazy, you're in fight or flight, and then part of your triangle is going to either try to make up for that adrenal reaction with the heart or the thyroid or both. So yeah, I mean, the whole point is, yes, that's why I find that most mistakes are found on thyroid tests, blood tests. And that's why a lot of times people go into their hospital, get their blood done, and they try to fix it with medication, and it doesn't work at all. In fact, most of the time, the stories that come to my office are people that got worse after their medication was put. So getting back to characteristics of hypo and hyper.
Yeah.
So hyper, let's look at that first. In my opinion, besides the hypofluxation, you know, with the hidden hyperthyroid thing, a hyperthyroid is often misdiagnosed as ADHD in children, because this will interest a lot of people. And I wouldn't say it with such confidence if by giving them a couple of little things like a fish oil with a lot of DHA and some calcium, and watch that ADH child turn into a regular, focused, relaxed child. If that didn't happen so often, I wouldn't even say it with this much conviction, but it's just such an easy fix, and they're either hiding it from us or they're not being told and nobody's figuring it out. I don't know what's going on, but our children need this information out there because it's such an easy way to stop a lifetime of being labeled bipolar or just hyperactive or depressed, because one of the symptoms of hypothyroid is depression. We use that word too loosely, by the way, I feel. I mean, just a melancholy feel, maybe a lack of drive, that's coming from the thyroid when it's not functioning properly. Hyper is almost manic sometimes, and that's anxiety. Yeah. So hyperthyroid, the thyroid starts going crazy. If it's hidden hyperthyroid, it reacts to physical activity. So if you, even walking up the stairs, at the top of the stairs, a lot of people tell me, yes, I feel something revving, thinking I'm out of shape, which really has nothing to do with it at that time. So technical characteristics are oily hair and dry hair, dry with hypo, oily with hyper, you know, hair loss with hypo. Okay, that's a big thing. People coming to me, they have no idea about the thyroid, but they come to me with, my hair's falling out endlessly. I mean, there are other reasons, of course, but the thyroid is a major player in hair loss. A typical scenario for somebody's thyroid gone too long, too, you know, just too hypo for too long is they lose the outer third of their eyebrow. And so, but to me, that's like way beyond, and it's been going on a super long time, and, you know, they have needed help.
I was going to say, one of the things I noticed for me is that the nail beds, the moons in the nail beds were pretty much absent in all my fingers except my thumbs. And the doctor told me that once I got on the thyroid medication, they would come back. And I've been on thyroid medication for over 10 years now. And they haven't come back all the way. On my left hand, I think I have to the middle finger, and I just have my index and thumb finger on the right hand. So I know that that's another sign of like hypothyroidism, is you've lost those moons in your nail beds.
Yeah, I think where that's really leading us is to our next topic that we don't want to talk about that much yet, because I really do think that has more to do with that than the actual thyroid, and it's a symptom they've noticed, and so among many other things,
correlation is not causation.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I have
dry skin. I'm sorry, dry skin, hypo, oily skin, hyper, goes with the hair though, you know, similar.
Okay, and then with the hidden hyperthyroid, so like that was the thing that like I came and presented, and since then, like some other people I know who've been to you said that you said the same about that. Now for me, I think it was a little difficult to unwind, because I also came to you when I had this thing where I was in a lake and I got parasites, and so that was causing some anxiety. So it was hard to tease what was what out, right?
Right.
So like what I understood the hidden hyperthyroid to be is that like I think it's overactive except for when it's underactive, right? Yeah. Like it's kind of like when I say I like everything except for the things I don't like, right? Like that.
Well, I think you're partly right. Really what you're dealing with is a tired thyroid. So there's a difference between a hypothyroid, which is an underproducing thyroid because of something wrong with the thyroid, or if it's just tired. Mm-hmm. And so why is it tired? Because it spent so much time being hyper. Mm-hmm. So finally, at some point, if the person doesn't eat exactly right or doesn't get enough sleep, which, you know, in our younger years, this happens a lot. So once a thyroid poops out, that's what I wanted to talk to you about before, the infertility.
Oh, that's interesting. So, I was just thinking about that.
So when I was telling you about the hormones, well, the thyroid hypo, when it goes into its burnt out state, just doesn't give the signals for the hormones. So I have to say, out of all my infertility cases, which I've had quite a few at this point, there's only one that I haven't been able to get to actually conceive. And there were other circumstances involved there. But for the most part, what I do is I just fix their thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
It's like almost uncanny how fixing the thyroid, and then together with that comes the adrenals, supporting those, within a couple of months, people are getting pregnant.
Yeah.
I say I got them pregnant, but that's a little.
Right. but hey,
It just comes out that way.
I had a client who was struggling to get pregnant, you know what I mean? Like for a long time, and came to me for nutritional consultation to, sort of try and get her body in the best, place to either become pregnant naturally, or if they decided to try in vitro again, that it would take.
Right.
And we made a lot of modifications to the diet, but the biggest thing was the removal of sugar and coffee. So there we have, on a certain level, thyroid and adrenal and whatever. And very quickly, she, about 2 or 3 months into our working together, she got pregnant. Right. And so I hadn't thought of it necessarily about a thyroid thing. I knew adrenals were an issue with her because of the coffee consumption. Right. Because a lot of coffee with her, not just a little bit.
Oh.
But yeah, so those absolutely. So that is interesting because you struggle with some of that stuff, right?
Oh, I struggled with fertility. Yeah, a lot. And supposedly there were other things involved because I had a gluten issue that I didn't know about and a methylation problem that I didn't know about. And so there were a lot of.
All leading to our other, not to be talked about yet, topic.
So I want to pull up Phil's questions for a second because I did want to address Graves' disease. Here he had a question. Well, these were his questions. I want to make sure I get to this before. Well, his question was, does one ever really recover from thyroid issues, right? And he said he'd been diagnosed with Graves' disease only to be later told that he has hypothyroidism. I have a cousin that had Graves' disease and has her thyroid removed, but is still on thyroid medication. I don't understand. What is the deal here? Can you kind of explain some of that? Is it possible to fully recover, or is there always something that has to be managed? And the Graves' disease question, yeah.
Well, they just like to give names to conditions of either hypo or hyperthyroid, right? It's whatever gentleman in the history of our, discoveries of thyroid conditions got to throw their name on a set of symptoms that either really are hyper or hypo. So that's why I never really talk about those diagnoses, and I ask people to please get them out of your brain and existence, because the truth is we just need to stabilize your thyroid, whether that means calming it down or speeding it up, and that's where that hidden hyperthyroid is so important, because it's a little tiny test you do, and it's not a blood test. And because of my intuitive way of working now, I don't need to do this, and that's why you guys probably don't know. But in the old days, I used to, and this is the way I was taught, I'll have you stand there, I'll muscle test your thyroid, generally test it's a 0. Then I'll have you jog on the spot for 1 minute. Then I go back to your thyroid exactly the same way, and all of a sudden it's revving at 60 or 80 instead of a 10, which is supposed to be a 10 on that scale. So then right away I know what I'm dealing with. It's an overreacted thyroid to physical activity, which is essentially the marker for whether you have hidden hyperthyroid or not. Now, if you have a 0 thyroid and you jog and it's still a 0, then yeah, I'm dealing with a hypothyroid. And so that's just going to let me support your thyroid and not worry about the set of other things that I do when it's hidden hyper. And the hard part about this is somebody will present with a thyroid that's so not functioning, and it doesn't come out right away that it's hidden hyper. I have to actually get through a couple of layers of healing, and then kaboom, there's your hidden hyperthyroid. So it's not as clear cut and easy as that always. We have so many other things interfering. But for the most part, I have to tell you that the majority of the people have hidden hyperthyroid, so that when you talk to your friends that see me and they go, oh, she said I have that. People can say what they want, really. And I've heard other holistic healers say this, but there are certain conditions that are just in epidemic proportions right now. And that is one of them.
Yeah. that's interesting. I remember when the first time I went to you, you even said, I remember this, oh, you're actually all pretty good, because I was super clean with my diet at that point. Like I had really been on several months of like being pretty perfect with my diet. You're like, so you said it's rare that you find that on the first session with somebody that hit, you know, so I had the parasite issue where you're like, oh, we're good. It's just the parasites and this, I can, you know, everything else is good. But everyone else that I've known who you've mentioned that to, it's usually come later, a couple of sessions in, that you sort of find that. I just dropped my list of questions. As for the Graves' disease or the removal of the thyroid, like I find that fascinating. Like my cousin had her thyroid removed, but is still on thyroid medication. Is this kind of like, is this, if we look at it a different way, evidence that like, even if you don't actually have something, like it's kind of like the idea of like a phantom organ or a phantom thing, like you can still like holographically or through intention or whatever, it's still functioning. Like, is it, I'm having trouble formulating exactly what I mean here, right? But like, what is that if a person doesn't have a thyroid but still has issues with their thyroid and has to be on medication for something that they don't have?
Because the thyroid is responsible for T3 and T4 among other hormones.
Okay.
So your body needs those, whether you have a thyroid or not. So
Well,
what
the medicine is just that. The medicine is just creating those hormones.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what's supposed to be happening. But I learned, and I never really researched it to find out if it's true or do we have any proof in what I do, but that your kidneys can actually start creating some of these hormones, producing the hormones among other tissue in your body, and that your thyroid can actually start growing back. Now, scientifically, we think, oh, that's impossible. But there have been noted cases of people who had a thyroid removed, whether they left a tiny little bit of the tissue or whatever the case may be. To me, that makes a little more logical sense. If they left a little, that it grew.
Yep.
But if I'm not mistaken, I've also read about cases where they completely, or at least thought they completely removed it, and then it actually started growing back.
All right.
So, cool. The body's a miraculous piece of machinery. I mean, nothing surprises me at all.
So you also said earlier, you referred to this, but I just want to make sure that the question is fully asked and answered. He wanted to know, does the liver work in conjunction with the thyroid? You did reference that earlier, but we didn't go deep in there. So can you elaborate a little bit on the connect? Because we've talked about the adrenals, the triangle, which is the thyroid, the heart, and the adrenals. How is the liver? And you just talked about the kidney, and the way it works sometimes with the thyroid can even start to back it up and do some of the things the thyroid can't do. What about the liver?
So, I mean, just to answer that question about any organ, everything is related, right? Anything can cause anything. Everything is related. So since the liver is responsible for so many different things, I mean, literally so many different things. And one of the most important is filtering stuff out, dumping it into the bowel so that we can excrete it. Yes. Yeah. So, but my connection to the thyroid that I have found is the signaling to release, or the signal for the production of hormones that goes through the liver stops happening. And so do I even know if this is in the biology notebooks? I really don't know. These are my findings that I find throughout. And as soon as I can test a thyroid case, and I will do the estrogen measuring, the progesterone, testosterone, everything that, the quote unquote important hormones, and the levels are way off. I think this may have happened with you, Laura, that things were off. But when you fix the thyroid and then the liver is getting the right signals, all of a sudden, boom, those things start to balance out some miraculous way. And that's just that's the big thing with the liver. But I'm sure there are other things not really coming to mind right now, but I'm sure that because of the T3, T4, right? T4 produced by the thyroid then has to convert in the mitochondria. Do you know what the mitochondria do? They're the
energy production,
ATP in the cells, in each individual cell. So imagine if that's not going on, how is any cell really up to par in your body if your thyroid's not giving that to you, right?
Yeah.
So think of it that way. But yes, absolutely affects the liver, the pancreas, the spleen, the uterus, the prostate. Everything is affected by the thyroid.
Cool.
One of the things that I started doing before I had met you was that the medical medium had a book called The Thyroid Healing. And I went through this book because I was trying to get off thyroid medication and heal my thyroid because I really believed in what I was reading. And there, at the time, a lot of people had said that they were doing it and were healing their thyroids. And I got the book, read it. It talks a lot about EBV, and which we're going to talk about later. But one of the main things that I got out of that was drinking all this celery juice. And so I was drinking tons and tons of celery juice, and I felt worse and worse. And I felt like it damaged me more than it helped me. And so I got off of it and went back to the doctor and got back on thyroid medication so that I could just start to feel better. And I feel like this guy kind of is doing a little bit of a disservice to people who are really serious about healing their thyroids. There's not really medical evidence backing up drinking celery juice to heal your thyroid.
Okay, and I understand your take because of your personal experience.
Yes.
Which just fortifies my theory about other things are involved, and that can't possibly be the safe for everyone. Otherwise, what are we doing? Everybody just get on celery juice and it fixes everything. Right? I mean, and I've tested this with my own body. I did very well on celery juice because I was at the time not producing the acids that my stomach needed to break down my food properly. So that to me is the main thing about the celery. And by getting those acids in your stomach, you help all the other processes, getting the nutrients out of your food, making the most of things, right? Having them properly broken down. Now, can I talk about you personally?
Sure.
Okay, so turns out you have a detoxification pathway problem, right?
Yeah.
That was why you didn't do well on celery juice. So he should maybe say, because it does cause a lot more intense detox, the celery juice. He should maybe put out there that if you tend to not detox properly, which most people, unfortunately, they don't realize. So he could say, okay, if you tend to get eczema or rashes, or if you tend to have high allergies, he could say certain things that would clue people in that, oh, maybe this isn't for me. Or just as simple as, okay, if you start to do the celery and you don't feel good on it, then just please stop. That means your body's not ready for that step yet. That's what he should put out there, because you're not my only one. Okay. And so this big thing that I have really focused in on, the detox pathways, which gets very involved, as you know, and gets very complicated, has to do with everything that causes a detox, which happens to be everything the medical medium is about. He's about detoxing your body. So if your pathways don't support your ability to detox, you're in trouble. And that's really the biggest negative I see about an otherwise very positive thing going on with this medical medium movement. Okay, he's got some really good information.
Yeah, so Phil also had a question about this book called Thyroid Healing from the Medical Medium and whatnot. My take like on all this, because I of course started hearing about it when it was happening and noticing that all of a sudden all the juice places I go to were also just selling plain celery juice and whatever, is that, and this goes for everything, there is no one answer for everybody, period, ever, end of story. Like there's no one right diet that works for everybody.
That's my point. That's my point. Yes.
But also, there was no discussion from him about the importance of making sure that your celery is organic. So a lot of people who are just going and buying tons and tons of celery, and even if you wash your celery, if there's crap all over it, it's in there. But maybe if, a lot of people don't perfectly wash their vegetables. So then even if they might have been doing something good with the celery, they're now consuming a bunch of, pesticides and glyphosate and whatever the heck else is on there, and metals from the fucking chemtrails and this and that and the other thing. So then there's all this stuff in their system. Right. So I noticed that, so that like that was never discussed. Like there's never that distinction made, which I think is important. And that's often something I criticize people in vegan who propose vegan stuff, is they're not
pushing the organic thing.
They get too involved in the ethics and the religious part of the vegan diet and don't talk enough about making sure the quality of food you eat is good, making sure that you're not eating more sugar because you're not eating protein and fat and blah blah. They don't do that. And then the other thing with this, that literally, like I thought this was hilarious, but it just shows how somebody doing this can have all these other physical implications for some people and social implications and whatnot, is literally the price of juice at everywhere that because I was really into green juice at the time, went up because there was a celery shortage because people were buying so much celery. And literally there was like signs up that said we've had to raise the prices of our juices 50 cents because there's a celery shortage. Right.
Yeah, I heard similar things, and probably only in California, but you know, I heard that the grocery stores were upping their prices of celery too. And that's one of the other things I didn't like happened is I think it was Pure Encapsulations who at first the medical medium was saying had really good product, which is true, they do. But like literally within a couple of weeks, they really escalated their prices, which I just, you know, there's so many ethical and moral standards that should come along with this being healthy movement and this service to other movement that we're going through, and just an awakening like that should, to me, always come with it. But I'm learning very quickly that it's not the case.
Well, one of the things that, I mean, this sounds like a silly thing, but like, you know, when you watch professional sports, that the players have their sponsors patches on their shirt or on their hat. You can see who they're sponsored by. And I feel like people who are giving medical advice or different kinds of things like that, if they have an affiliation with, there's nothing wrong with having an affiliation if you think something is good, as long as you're disclosing what that affiliation is and how much you don't have to give exacts, but like if it's a main portion of your you know, money making, people need to understand that you have a reason why you're saying that isn't just that you think it's good, right? So I think a lot more transparency in terms of, you know, people's affiliations when they're making recommendations.
Well, that's why I think medical mediums stopped recommending specific things.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
Because he ran into that issue. Like, here's a guy, I don't think he knew he was going to get as popular as he did. And we have to keep in mind, he's just a regular guy with this gift, right?
Yeah.
So he's only human, and he's going through his human changes and responding with his human characteristics. But I think it's kind of a learn as you go scenario, which is for most of us, right? I've had 20 years of being a chiropractor. The last 10 spent honing my nutrition stuff. The last 5, the intuitive stuff. So, you know, did I make mistakes along the way? Of course I have. A lot of things I didn't know, but it's just a natural progression. And he's going to go through his things, and we'll see. Right now, I think the benefit outweighs the opposite of him, for example. And one gift I have received from him is, you know, looking things at another perspective, yet another perspective, because I take everything I hear and I do my own personal testing methods that you guys are well aware of. But, you know, I just figure things out, and that's my intuition, as well as just some kind of manifesting that I do, you know, and then I come up with answers. So a lot of stuff's going on, and I can't be alone. Other practitioners have to be going through this the same as I, right? So we just have to be a little understanding. We can't get angry at people for trying to do things. We just have to kind of go with the flow, and everybody's, if they are coming from a good place and their intention is good, then you just have to take everything they say with a grain of salt and make your own decisions about stuff. Well, you know, take responsibility.
I want to add one thing to their intentions. If their intentions truly are good and they get something wrong and it's brought to their attention, they'll address their mistake.
Correct.
Yeah, that's like a big one for me, because there's a lot of people out there who can say that their intentions are great, but if they're, you know, once you become like aware that you either that you've made a mistake and that you're wrong, acknowledging it, or even if you're not sure, even if you still think you're right, but there seems to be a counter, something people are saying that has some relevance, acknowledge it. Don't just pretend it doesn't exist. Right. I think that's kind of important.
You guys both know me. I'm very transparent. Yeah. I can right in front of you think, oh my God, you might be right. I never thought of that before. boom, here we go. And then it leads us to another discovery, right?
Absolutely. All right. So last question on this segment before we sort of move on over it, and just because it's sort of the bridge here is, how does the thyroid connect to the EBV situation? Because that's a big part of the medical mediums book, and that was part of Phil's question, but you also brought it up. So let's kind of give a little brief description of that, and then we'll end this segment and we'll pick up with EBV in the other half.
Okay, so for people that don't know, EBV stands for Epstein-Barr virus, and it is being found, in my practice, I'm finding it in at least 90% of my patients, okay, which is very alarming if you think about it, for a virus that is also known as mononucleosis, or mono, you know, when you were in high school or whatever, kids got mono. Turns out that first stage or second stage of mono is highly contagious. And that's why so many people, you know, that fed that. You could literally be in the classroom with them and you would end up with that. You okay there?
I'm having a huge revelation right now as we're talking. That is
like you're having a hot flash.
No. Well, like, it's just like, it's so strong, the intuition that I'm having right now about something, that it was like, oh my God. And it's, okay, so I'm going to write it down while you guys continue talking, and then we'll address it in the next.
You do that. So this virus, to me, it's kind of simple. It gets in your central nervous system, which, for those people that may not realize, it is your spinal cord and your brain, right? Runs brain down. Literally every nerve in your body, which if you peeled your skin off and just had the nerve showing, you would be able to still tell exactly what you look like. Okay, that's how many nerves we have in our body. So it's kind of a gross thing, but you know, just picture a bunch of nerves with exactly the same characteristics without the skin, you would be able to totally see it was you. So the virus gets into the central nervous system and then literally can go to any nerve in your body from there, because everything is joined, nothing is separated in our bodies. We are not a compartmentalized being, and that's aside from the energy thing that we are, right? The light body that we are. So this virus can literally be the cause of any dysfunction in any nerve. So just marinate that for a minute and look at the implications there. Okay, so, and I'm talking about even little dark spots on your skin. All right, it could be that discrete and it could be that singular. And then the virus also has the ability to lay dormant in your body. Totally go to sleep, not wake up, not do anything. Those are the main points about it. I mean, if you really think about that, is so huge right there. And like how we get it and everything, we might talk about that later, because we really don't know, right? A virus is a virus. Do viruses kind of, now the theory that's coming out with all the virologists is that all our viruses are in our body already, and as they present themselves, they're actually just coming out. It's nothing.
The exosome theory, like
right?
Yes.
So my thought for that, as well as pretty much everything, is that there's probably cases of all of the above happening. Okay, so the connection then between the thyroid and Epstein-Barr virus is what's stopping the virus from getting into your thyroid? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Follows the nerves that innervate, that supply the thyroid, right? Easy peasy. If you happen to be one of the unfortunate ones that the virus does trickle down to your thyroid, then you have thyroid issues. If it's one that trickles down to your spleen, you have spleen issues. I mean, it's just kind of that simple. You know, I know it's more complicated than that, but just for starting conversation, that's really how simple it is.
All right. Awesome. We're going to move over to the patrons hour. Before we do that, I know your practice is in transition right now, and you're going through some evolution in the way you're presenting yourself and whatnot. So why don't you tell people what you're doing and where they can find you?
Well, I have, and it's not just because of COVID. This was in my aspirations. I just didn't know it was going to happen this quickly. And that is that I'm now completely virtual. I'm not going to have an office that people come to me in person. And so the type of patients I've been getting, the way things have just been working out, it's made it possible for me. So I'm super excited. My platform has not been totally fixed up yet, but it will be. And then I will be having a new website and a new platform that's HIPAA compliant, so we can speak very privately and, you know, all that other stuff that comes on with HIPAA. But KeasberryHealthCenter.com is my website, and the website now does not lead you there yet, but that's because it hasn't happened yet. So by the end of July, everything should be in full swing. And when you go to my website, then there will be links to the platform, and that's where you're going to be able to set up your own appointments, and I will be doing everything virtually. So
for now, people can go to your website and call for a regular appointment that you do.
That's how they would make an appointment now. Yes. Okay. Just call. And, you know, I realize not everybody's tech savvy and not everybody does the computer thing or the phone, the smartphone. So we're always going to be available to call no matter what.
Cool. All right. So stick with us, guys, to the other side. We're going to talk about Epstein-Barr virus. I have a couple of questions that came up during the first hour that I thought would be interesting over there as well. And then also this sort of theory and connection that I just put together here. I'm going to run it by you, even though some of it might be a little out of your general wheelhouse, maybe not so much. All right, guys. So join us at patreon.com/offplanetmedia, and we'll see you on the other side.